Welcome to Deges and Dragons.
I thought this was going to be hard, but...
Welcome to Deges and Dragons.
Who wants some of the Ripper?
They're state champs, baby. Woo!
He's clearly Captain. I'm a man of the people.
Shattered world.
Ripper knows. Ripper always knows.
Degecast.
And welcome to another episode of the Degecast, the supplemental podcast for our YouTube show, Deges and Dragons. Hey, do you want to be a part of this show? You can. Join us. Email us at degetime@gmail.com or leave us a message at the Degetime voicemail at 617-506-9686, and we'll answer your questions, read your comments right here next week. Hey, I'm your host, Nate Lindberg, and you can find me on Twitter at Nate Lindberg, and you can follow our brand on Facebook, Twitter, and most importantly, YouTube at Degetime. And now joining me, as always, we have our veteran RPG gamer, our permanent member of our Deges and Dragons player panel, and he is from parts unknown. Please welcome Tony Shermuxness.
What's up?
What's going on tonight, man?
Not much, you?
Just trying not to melt to death. As I was telling these guys before we went on the air, my AC died today, so my apartment has been incredibly hot today.
It doesn't help that it's like 98 degrees outside where we're at too.
No, like some of the hottest days of the year, and I have no air conditioning. Oh God. And hey, next, he's our psychology and therapy expert. He's our resident game master, and he also happens to hail from across the river to West Newbury, Massachusetts. He is Conrad Audette.
Hello. This is, I didn't know if you were going to say something crazy about me, so it's just like, just give it a moment.
No. Tonight, we don't have any crazy, super crazy intros. I kind of slacked on that a little bit tonight. So, hey, it's okay. Go back and listen to some of the other crazy intros if you guys want some crazy intros. But
yes.
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 All right. And now, if one Nathan wasn't enough on this show, hey, let's double it and add another. He's the creator of the Worldwide Wrestling RPG. Please join me in welcoming to the Degecast, Nathan Paoletta.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me into your squared circle.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's kind of nice thinking about having my own ring. I've always wanted one of those. So now, as you guys have, we just finished up our Worldwide Wrestling RPG gameplay. So you guys got to see how my first foray into GMing went, which was certainly fun, nerve-wracking, and a little crazy. But one of the things that we've talked about, consistently over the past few weeks is, hey, I'm a giant wrestling nerd, it's kind of nice to have another giant wrestling nerd on the show, as we talked about in the past. Conrad, Tony, they're casual not RPG fans. They're the RPG nerds. I'm the casual RPG guy, but they're casual wrestling fans. So just kind of curious, Nathan. Obviously you've created this game, but in the year 2020, in August of 2020, as we are filming this, what is your level of wrestling fandom?
So, interesting question, mostly because it's a super interesting time for wrestling, right? Because we are in the crowdless arena era, which is its own, I think, really memorable. I mean, maybe it's a blip, maybe it'll be longer than that, who knows? But it's an interesting time for wrestling, generally. For me, I am I think like most people, I cycle in and out of being like super into things and then less so, depending on what's going on. And in the last year, I was kind of on a low ebb and also had a baby, so a lot of my attention and emotional bandwidth, was
diverted elsewhere.
Right. So I've been kind of, I would say, at an ebb, right? That's when the tide's going out, right? That's the low part.
Sure. I think so. We'll go with that.
Yeah. So I'm from the desert. I don't know about tides. Yeah, so I've been kind of at an ebb for a while, but I think it's been really interesting kind of checking back in over the last 6-8 months, just kind of seeing where things are at in this time when it's like there's a lot of really creative ways to go about doing wrestling. And so that's been super interesting. In terms of just like what I actually am watching, the most consistent thing I've watched over the last couple of years is mostly New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Oh, nice.
That's been my main thing.
My
for a while.
co-host on my other podcast would love to hear that. He's a massive New Japan nerd, co-host of one of the New Japan podcasts, PW Torch. Massive New Japan fan. Keeps trying to get me to, like, he keeps recommending matches, and I'll sit down and watch them, and I'm like, all right, I got to get into this, and I just never do. I got to do it.
It's it's interesting because I think a lot of the the New Japan nerds, as you say, who are deep into it, I think there is an appreciation of the big match, like the 40-minute like epic clash. That's where, like, if you've been watching for a while, a lot of like really nuanced stuff is like paying off things that happened a year ago, 2 years ago, stuff like that. But the match style is very much like all the cool stuff happens in the last 10 minutes. So you can usually skip to the last 10 minutes of a lot of those matches if you just want to like watch all the cool stuff. But yeah, a lot of stuff on the lower card is super fun if you're into those performers, and they're usually faster. So, I mean, like the juniors tag division is usually pretty fun. I don't know. I don't need to go into it. Yeah.
Hey, if you're anything like me, you could sit here and talk all day about wrestling. So
It sounds like you're a fan.
You could describe me as a fan of wrestling. Yes.
It's lately it's been, for the most part, it's been NXT and Dynamite that I've been I'm keeping up with, but SmackDown, Raw, kind of on the periphery, watching pay-per-views and kind of reading recaps the next day. But I'm kind of on that same ebb right now too. This is a very interesting time in wrestling. We, in the first wrestling podcast that we had for Worldwide Wrestling RPG, we had Zach Hadorn on, who does the it's called On the Canvas with Zach Hadorn on PW Torch, and he looks into the art of pro wrestling. And one of the things that he brought up on that podcast was just how wrestling draws from the crowd, and you use the crowd to tell the story and all that stuff. And he's absolutely 100% right. And it's been so interesting in the past, 6-7 months, however long it's been at this point, where we use since March. I think March 16th was the last televised WWE show with the crowd. They've had to find very unique ways to tell those stories, and it took them a while to do it. And I think they're still even trying to find their groove. But I think with some of these like more cinematic matches, like they did at like WrestleMania and a couple of the NXT takeovers, Dynamite, they've been doing a few of them as well. AEW in general, really. It's cool. It's very it's very interesting. They've been trying some new things and pushing some new people, and it's been definitely not the year I would have expected. That's for sure.
In some ways, it's like it's more interesting than it is entertaining. In some ways, like I am interested to see what the televised shows that are like, we are committed to doing stuff every week.
Ironically, on Raw and SmackDown right now, there is a terrorist organization that is mimicking Antifa that is ravaging through all of the different shows, causing technical glitches. Perhaps Retribution has now attacked our show.
Dude, or is it Technotac from...
Oh, it could be Technotac.
Yeah.
Could be
There he
Technotac.
goes.
He just dropped. Technotac just forced him out.
So we'll keep talking for a minute here, as we wait for Nathan to come back. But as I was saying, it's been a very, very strange time in pro wrestling right now, and where you do draw so much from the crowd and so much from just that energy that the crowd brings. It's certainly interesting to not have a crowd in the audience. There are there's a paid crowd. They'll have, undercard wrestlers kind of, surrounding the ring right now. But, you don't necessarily get that same organic response because everybody in the crowd is really a paid member of the crowd. They're employed by the company. So in a way, it's good for the company because they're able to kind of get the storylines across the way that they want, and they don't have to worry about the fans hijacking a show. But at the same time, you don't get that organic, guttural fan response either. And it's certainly been an interesting time. But Nathan, I think we have you back.
Hi. Yeah, my internet at my house, or my power just went out.
Oh.
So I'm actually calling in from my phone.
Oh, geez.
I don't know if I'm sounding okay.
No, you sound fine. You sound fine.
Okay.
So the modern marvels of technology, you get power dropping, but you can still do an interview.
Yeah, I'm in Chicago, and we just had a big. We basically had a tornado come through the city yesterday.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So and everything has been fine, and then apparently my power just went out. So that's great. But here I am with you.
All right. Well, hey, we're glad to have you. Glad to have you back. Thank you. Taking the time and doing that. So. But yeah, so we were just kind of talking about the current state of pro wrestling and all that. I think we might have talked it to death at this point. So, Tony, I'm gonna do what I've done in the past. We're gonna throw it over to you to get the list of questions started off proper.
Certainly. So Nathan, you're the mastermind behind the WRPG and NDP designs. Is this a solo venture, or do you have other people that you work with on your projects?
So it is primarily solo. I am a self-publisher, as well as, so I design, write, mostly do the layout for my stuff and publish. And then I will hire I'll hire artists and, editors and stuff like that for projects that need them on a case-by-case basis. But the NDP design is just me doing what you do. Yeah, doing what I do, doing the game design hustle.
Nice.
That's pretty awesome then. Just primarily just you. How many years were you working on the WRPG before you ended up launching it?
That's a good question that always takes me a second to do the math. But it was about
carry the 2
years. Yeah. Walk away from the cicadas. I don't know if those are coming over my headphones. Sounds like I'm in some kind of crazy survivalist situation. I'm fine, I promise.
Are you really? Cough twice if you need help.
No, it's all good. So it was about 2 years of time between when I kind of seriously went like, oh, this game has some legs. There's a concept here that's actually going to turn into something fun. And when it turned into the first core book, which was the result of a Kickstarter campaign. So I started working on it kind of in earnest, kind of early 2014-ish. And then the book actually, it was out to backers a little earlier, but it was actually out in like early 2016. So, yeah.
Yeah. For some reason, I thought it was out longer than that because Tony and a group of his, another group of his friends, they've been playing a campaign for a few years now. I thought it was.
That's now that I'm thinking about that too. That tracks. I think we brought it up to the campsite the first time in it was either 2016 or 2017. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
And that's awesome to hear. So thanks for checking it out and keeping with it for so long.
Hey, no problem.
Are you guys? Because actually, Tony's going to be heading up to camp. I think this weekend. Are you guys planning on continuing the Hampton? What is it? Hampton Beach Fight League?
Yeah, Hampton Beach Combat League.
Combat
and
League.
Yeah, we already have like a group chat going on. What the season is kind of going to entail. Hopefully it's going to be fun.
Excellent. That's awesome.
I'm sure it will be.
That's awesome.
Nice.
No, cool. So now I think I probably know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What was the original inspiration for the Worldwide Wrestling RPG?
Well, I mean, wrestling is cool and all. So the original kind of like where it actually came from really was a kind of a specific situation where I had gotten much more heavily into wrestling. Like I think unlike many people, I actually got into wrestling in college. So I've not been a lifelong wrestling fan, but so I got into it a little later, and then, you graduate, you go, you don't have cable anymore, you fall out of it for a little while, and then I got back into it after I moved to Chicago, and started getting into indie wrestling. Some of the companies out here and some of the touring companies that were coming through at the time.
Chicago is like probably the best wrestling city in the country.
It's there's been some very cool stuff. It's been a treat to be here for at least 4 or 5 of those years. I would say there's been some peak wrestling happening.
Did you make it to to All In or All Out?
No, those were a little after I really
fair enough.
Cut the. Not cut the cord, but they're a little after I was really actively going to stuff in the last couple of years.
Sure.
They're also not in. They always say they're in Chicago, but they're actually in an arena that is not in Chicago. So it's actually kind of a pain in the ass to get out there. And
right,
people are and the tickets went so fast. Like if you weren't like really into it, they were.
Yeah, they think there was like 30 seconds. They sold out.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. But yeah, so anyway, around that time, I was like much more into wrestling and into indie wrestling specifically. And I was also playing in a game of Apocalypse World by the Bakers, Vincent and Meg Baker, which was one of the longer kind of campaign games that I'd been in for a while, because kind of my game lifestyle is very playtesty, one-shotty, trying stuff out, playing testing other people's stuff. So it was, the first time I'd been in a longer game for a while, and it was just kind of those two things juxtaposed kind of at the same time. I started thinking about wrestling, like it's a great pun, like the wrestling move in Apocalypse World, the things you do are moves. So it's like, what would a Apocalypse World wrestling move be? And once I sat down and actually plotted out what some of those things would be, right? Discrete things that characters do over and over with either unpredictable or snowballing effects, right? That push the story forward. And so that's where, cutting a promo, working the audience, performing athletic feats, like all that stuff, all the core, the basic moves are basically just from thinking of that. And, and so I kind of noodled around with it, and I put together a playtest for a convention that year just to play with some other wrestling buddy people who would be there. And it was really fun. And it was like, oh, this might actually be a fun game for people who aren't super wrestling nerds as well. Just got momentum from there.
Yeah, because we've got a small little community going for Deeges and Dragons here on Discord. I was talking with one of our members, Sophia, and she wasn't allowed to watch wrestling growing up, but we were talking, and she was like, she certainly sees the appeal to pro wrestling, and just the theatrics and the pageantry and everything. We kind of got talking a little bit about this game. It seemed like something she'd be interested in playing, down the line. And it's a game that I feel like if you're not an RPG guy, but you're a wrestling fan, you're going to have fun playing it. If you're not a wrestling fan, but you're an RPG fan, you're going to have fun playing it. It's got that little mix. I think that really anybody can just dive into this and enjoy it.
Yeah, that was really, and that's very intentional. I really wanted to have that ability to crossover kind of people who are interested in one thing, but not very experienced with it necessarily, or have like the one friend, right? Like the one wrestling friend or the one RPG friend.
The one wrestling friend. I know that well.
Yeah, so a lot of like kind of the presentation and some of the material in the book, and trying to use like the right jargon, but not too much, like that kind of stuff. That's all really been an intentional effort to try and keep things accessible for people who are like, I see that you're excited about this, and I kind of know about it, so let me find out what the deal is. The wrestling curious, as I like to refer to them.
Yes, the wrestling curious. I like that. But Conrad, let's. We haven't heard much from you. Let's throw it over to you.
So I myself, my fandom extends to mostly like the Attitude Era, and there are all these just like great moments from that time, and a little bit beyond that. Like I distinctly recall somebody broke into John Cena's parents' house. That was probably like the last major event that I saw.
That was Edge.
It was Edge, and just like went in, like trashed his parents' house, like behind the scenes and whatnot. So there are like these great moments, and just, I mean, are there any particular wrestlers and or moments that really captured you and helped inspire other aspects of the game?
So when I was, when I was first introduced to WWE by my college roommate, I was immediately a huge Undertaker mark right off the bat.
Nice.
Which was kind of funny because at that time it was like kind of the waning days of like Biker Taker, and then kind of going, and then he like was gone for a while and then kind of came back with the full Druid Phenom thing.
Yep.
And that was what really got me. I've always really liked Undertaker. And I think there's some very specific things in the game, like one of the monsters moves, the like supernatural, like having a special supernatural match that you get to have, like that's a Kane Undertaker like move directly from that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I like a lot of wrestlers. Trying to think what would be the most interesting to talk about. Because it's like, at this point, because I've been working on the second edition and my brain's been like in the manuscript so much recently.
Yep.
It's just like, everything's just this big, like, gestalt, like, wrestling. So picking up an individual strand right this moment is a little, it's requiring my brain to change gears.
Fair enough, man. I know how that works.
Did you see Scotty Too Hottie and Rikishi Too Cool?
Yes. I love Scotty Too Hottie. I think he's the best. I was like, kind of like, I really liked him just like as a fan, and then kind of over time, people would kind of dish on him, and I'm like, he's actually really good. Like, he's actually a really good wrestler, and he's super fun. And then now he's like a firefighter or something, doing good work. So.
Yeah, well, no, he was doing that. Now he's a trainer down at the Performance Center in
really?
Orlando. Yeah, yep, yeah. I don't know if he's still, actually. No, I take that back. He might not still be, but he was for a while. I think he still is. But
that's like what first got me into like kind of more the wacky stuff, because like I myself too, I was like right from the beginning it was like Undertaker, and Kane and stuff, and then Too Cool came out, and I'm like, this dude, he's dancing and then he slaps them like in the neck, and the first time I saw it I was like, that's so lame, but then like the fifth time I saw it I was like, this is exactly how I want to be in wrestling video games.
Yeah. I think the silly stuff is like sometimes the best stuff because it doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of easier to to just have fun with sometimes. Yeah, I mean, I love a lot of Santino's stuff. To be perfectly honest,
I missed a lot of Santino's run.
I mean, a lot of it's real dumb, but some of the stuff that's kind of like is in kind of it's not just out there for like a dumb like transphobic, oh, you're dressed like a woman laugh. Like some of his other stuff that he got to do was pretty good, and he's a super entertaining character, very charismatic person, I always thought. So
Conrad, so you remember Mr. Sacco, right?
Oh yes.
So yeah, I knew you'd remember Mr. Sacco.
Mm.
So Santino, he didn't have a Mr. Sacco. He had a cobra that he would pull out of his trunks and pull it on his arm. That was like a sock puppet cobra, and then he would basically like use the tips of his fingers to like punch you in the neck.
I feel like I know that from the video games.
Probably one of the games, yeah.
Like
yeah.
he like loses control of his hand, right?
Yes, yeah,
That's
completely.
yeah, because it's a snake now.
Right. No, and those crazy aspects of wrestling are like some of the most fun for me. Like, you know, we've talked about it on a couple prior episodes at this point, but you know, Shikara was a promotion that I got into for a little while. You know, like Jervis Cottonbelly. I mean,
oh yeah.
You know, he picks up people, he cradles them to sleep, and he calls it the sleeper hold. And it's just, I mean, it's fantastic. Just, you know, things like that, you know, yes, wrestling has always been portrayed as like this, you know, they've tried to portray it as a legitimate sport, you know, and at least over the last 25 years or so, that's been harder and harder to do. But, you know, now you've got these promotions like Shikara, well, no longer Shikara, but you had Shikara, or, you know, just a couple other promotions like that they kind of lean into it and they make it.
I think, I mean, I totally was like in that era of Chikara fandom for sure. Los Ice Creams and Jervis Cottonbelly and like all the ants. I was huge Green Ant, then Silver Ant fan.
Devastation Corporation. One of my favorite matches I've ever seen was a singles match between Silver Ant and Blaster McMassive from the Devastation Corporation. Nice.
Where they just had this like very strong style-ish, just like we're just going to beat the crap out of each other for like 12 minutes.
Actually, I think I actually even know the match you're talking about, believe it or not.
Yeah, it was in the Logan Square Auditorium in Chicago, and it was amazing. It was just like, because there are two characters that are not comedic characters, but are usually in like slightly comedic storylines. Right. And then this match is just like, oh no, this isn't like a storyline match. This is just like, we're going to go just have a war for like no reason. And it was fantastic. So
it was actually Max Smashmaster that got me back into wrestling. No, that got me back into wrestling. So I basically he's a kid I went to school with, and I ran into at the gym, and he's like, "Hey, I know you used to like wrestling. You should check this out." And then the whole wrestling bug took hold again, and here I am.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, so you got me like right back into Shikara was really the first thing that drew me back into wrestling. I think it was like 2012-ish, 2013. It's right before the WWE Network launched. I know that. It was like it wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. It was just crazy and wacky and zany and weird, and I loved it.
It's like weird, but also like really like there's also just so much, I don't know, athleticism.
Yeah.
Because it's not just silly. It's not just weird. It's not just athletic, but it's like all of those in proportion.
Yep.
Which is
it's great. I love it. I loved it so much. So, now us here at Deeges and Dragons, we're all about RPG gaming and therapy. So what is it that you might have found, if anything, found therapeutic about working on this project? Either working on this project, RPGs in general, and I'm also going to extend that to wrestling because of particular topic. And I know I threw a little bit at you there, but I'd like to know what you think about that.
Sure. So I mentioned I've been working on the second edition, and so a lot of that is, in addition to going through the older stuff, also kind of bringing whatever I have that's new to the table, right? It's not just repackaging. It's like there's some new stuff, and part of that is like, what do I find compelling about wrestling now? Like, how is my relationship with wrestling different than it was in 2014, 2015? And I think that's been a really helpful process in terms of analyzing that for myself, because I think, maybe as listeners may have heard when we first started talking, as a little hedging a little bit about, what my feelings about, current wrestling are and stuff like that. Because I do think there's been some structural kind of company level stuff that's just like has made wrestling very difficult for me to watch. Like, I don't watch WWE anymore because I can't stomach the Saudi Arabia connection. Like, that's just how it is. Stuff like that. So, but that doesn't take away from like what's happening in the ring, right? Like, the art form of wrestling still has so much power to bring like joy and catharsis and like all that stuff. But like, how to get to that feels like it's gotten increasingly difficult for me. So working on the game and kind of being like, how do I put that together into why this edition exists? Like, how do I use that as part of the framing for how other people might want to think about wrestling? Because some people do start watching wrestling after playing the game, and like, I don't want to lead them down a bramble-ridden path. I want to try and express like the good stuff, and so this is kind of a long-winded. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, because there's certainly a lot of good stuff, and there's certainly a lot of bad stuff.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, I don't want to cut off anyone's joy, and I don't want to like invalidate anyone who is still getting what they need out of watching, Raw or SmackDown or whatever. Like, that's not for me to judge. But I also want to try and be nuanced about like talking about wrestling as a genre and as a form, as opposed to like real world wrestling that's happening right now, which is a little more fraught for me. So I would say that's been, I wouldn't be thinking about these things in this way and working through them in this kind of long-term way without doing it for a project. So that's certainly a place where these things intersect.
No, definitely. And you brought up the Saudi Arabia connection, and that's been a very tough sticking point for me as well. And it's actually the reason, the whole Saudi Arabia thing is the whole reason that I'm even involved with Torch at this point. The person that used to do they used to sit in the podcast chair that I sit in now, he had the exact same feelings that you do towards the whole Saudi Arabia thing. He just couldn't stomach it anymore. He couldn't watch it. It couldn't anything. Walked away, and I kind of got the opportunity to step into that, which was awesome and cool, and I've really enjoyed it. But it's especially now too with just a couple days ago, a lot that came out with there was a deposition and a lawsuit going on with the last trip over to Saudi Arabia, and there's some government involvement with the wrestlers not being able to fly back in time because Vince pissed. Sure, I'm not going to get into all that stuff right now, but I could sit here and talk about it all day. Say that again?
I said that's a deep hole.
Yeah, that's a deep, deep, deep rabbit hole. But it's like I've tried to like Raw and SmackDown themselves, they've been very stale for me for a while. I've loved NXT. I have for years at this point, and I try to think of it as its own separate company, its own separate entity, and I know it's not. I know it's not, but at least that's kind of how. And I know I hate to like turn a blind eye to the whole Saudi Arabia thing too, but it's like I've invested so much time, and it's time and energy into the product, but also it is my form of escape. And you know, yeah, there are other alternatives out there, but I don't know all the stats and I don't remember all the champions. You know, it's like so but I definitely hear what you're saying with that. It's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the I think any sufficiently advanced fandom runs into this, right? It's like there's no like purity in the world, so
Yeah.
you got to compartmentalize at some point, or else you just never would enjoy anything, and like that's kind of a sad way to live too. So, yeah,
sure.
so I think it's but it's important that people are kind of like making a conscious choice about what they're supporting. I think that's important. So,
100%.
yeah, it's there's a lot to parse once you really get into the stuff, get into the weeds.
Yeah, like, I was thinking the same thing. Like during that whole discussion, I was like, you've got like what Blizzard's actions with video games. Like people get mad at Wizards of the Coast. People get mad at the NFL and sports. Like there's something. Yeah, like you're so right. It's you have to just kind of be aware and do the best you can to enjoy things.
Yeah. You know, and especially in today's day and age of cancel culture, but that again is a whole other rabbit hole we could go down.
Yeah, that's why therapeutic release here.
Yes, therapeutic release, indeed.
I have one other answer to that if we still have some little time to get into it.
Oh yeah, by all means.
A couple years ago, I wrote an essay for a friend of mine. So a friend of mine has a wrestling zine called Pro Wrestling Feelings, which is great, and is what it says on the cover. It is people talking about their pro wrestling feelings. And I wrote an essay for one issue about my favorite wrestler, Katsuyori Shibata, who is a New Japan wrestler mainly, but who ended up, he ended up 2 years later, maybe, I think it was in 2018, he basically retired himself by headbutting Okada too hard in a big title match, and giving himself a brain aneurysm, which he recovered from and is now a trainer, but he basically had to retire from the ring.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So a couple of years prior to that, I wrote this essay about how I found myself being so into him because his style is so violent, but I am not I identify as a pacifist. I do not engage in violence, even as sport. Like, it's not my thing.
Yep.
We don't have to get into that, but that is something that I think about myself. And then I'm like, but my favorite wrestler is this guy who kicks people in the head, and it is this
right.
like transcendently beautiful thing that you can see like two people do in terms of like form and motion and storytelling and like all that stuff. So that was like a really focused moment where it was very much like looking at what is wrestling bringing to me on that level as like something that I can engage with, because it is accessing a thing that is not what I do or what I believe in, but is like I can appreciate it in this bounded way where my suspension of disbelief allows me to not judge what's happening because, you know, I know it's wrestling, right? Like I would
Right.
never watch that street fight. Like I don't watch MMA. Like that's not, you know, that doesn't entertain me at all.
Right.
But since wrestling is a constructed reality, that's different.
Like I won't watch MMA either for the most part. Every once in a while, like, somebody will recommend something and I'll watch it. But for the most part, it's the same thing. I feel like it's like very barbaric and, you know, things like that. But man, I'll go back and watch some of these old school, like Mick Foley, Terry Funk death matches.
Oh
and,
yeah.
you know, and all this stuff that just, they're so barbaric and, you know, some of the CZW stuff that I've seen, you know, some of the older, you know, John Moxley matches or, you know, things like that. And they're insane. But I, you know, I enjoy it, and I don't quite understand why. Maybe because I know it's not necessarily real, and it is, you know, scripted, and it is a fictional world. But yeah, that is always something that's kind of like made me wonder too. Why it's like I've always been drawn to that, but not necessarily the real life violence and real life, you know.
It's yeah. I mean, I think part of it is that it's a space where that stuff is like allowed, right? Kind of quote unquote, like things that are not allowed in our normal lives. But we still are part of the human experience. We put them on a stage or put them in, you know, in a TV show or something. And then wrestling is just so visceral that I think that connection can just get so strong for people.
Oh, 100%.
So if you were to play in a campaign right now, would you be a heel or a face? And what would your gimmick be?
So I like to be a support character. I think that comes from like doing so much GMing than when I'm a player. Some people are like, now I get to grab the spotlight and it's mine, and I'm like, but I can still do like GM stuff as a player though, right? So I will see what the group needs. If it's unbalanced one way or the other, I'll, you know, fill it up. I kind of like the challenge of playing a baby faces because I think it's harder.
Definitely.
In some ways, and so because I think there's some stuff that I'm like, when I watch wrestling, I'm like, this is what the babyface should do right here because this is what good people, you know, this is what good guys do, and then they don't do it, and I'm like, come on, you're missing the point. So if I play a babyface, then I get to do that stuff and not be swallowed by post Attitude Era irony about what, you know, goodness is. I like my. I think I had a good line to a friend once. I'm trying to remember. This isn't going to come out as pithy as I think it is, but it's like I like my action. It's like I like my action from the '90s, but my morality from the '80s. Something like that.
I like that.
I think the kind of NWA, WCW, early days of WCW era is like really where a lot of that booking is the stuff that I really like.
Yep.
But then the actual in-ring action, you know, like right now we have the greatest bumper crop of wrestlers the world's ever seen, right? Like,
Oh, by far.
It's just, it's just crazy how far it's gone in terms of athleticism. So
even in just like 10 years, it's nuts.
Oh yeah, it's wild. And then it's crazy to go back and watch some stuff. Like again, I have good friends who will be like, "Hey, you should see this All Japan match from 1992," and I'll watch it and be like, "Wow, that is stuff I have never seen before in a ring," and it was happening, you know, in like women's wrestling in 1992 and stuff like that. There's always something. There's always a precedent, right? Which is part of. I think it's like part of why I think part of why I still love wrestling is the historical aspect and going back and seeing all the older stuff because there's so much stuff I haven't seen, and so much of it is so great. So
no, that's That's a huge part of it for me is the history. Just the history of pro wrestling, the history, like, learning like title lineages and, the certain feuds that have really, stuck out for certain wrestlers and things like that. That's always been a huge part of it, at least for me, that like, it's, you get two wrestlers like, Undertaker and Edge, for example, right? They face each other at WrestleMania, and I'm like, okay, well, all right, now thinking back, when Edge kind of debuted, shortly after debuted, he was working for The Undertaker as part of the corporate ministry, and, how many times they actually faced in the ring, and like, I go back and plot it all out, and it, like, I don't know, call me weird, call me a nerd, call me whatever, but that's like I just love drawing all those little nuances of these stories out that the companies themselves may not have even thought about, and I'm kind of putting it together in my head. But
there's that moment where you're like, did that just happen because they're actually referencing something that happened like 2 years ago, or was that just an accident? But I noticed, right?
Right.
Like, haha, I get to be the smart one who pays attention to these things. No, I totally get you, though. I think that is a defining feature for a lot of the, I think the post-millennium fandom, right? People who have been watching since the Attitude Era is like, that's part of the fun, is kind of seeing all those connections that go back so far.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, Edge was weird to me when he was teamed up with like the Brood and stuff, and it wasn't until he got his fresh theme song, the
Rob Zombie or Alter Bridge?
Alter Bridge.
Yeah.
And then just because of that theme song, I was like, whoa, Edge is the man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild how like one little thing will kind of like make everything fall into place. And sometimes it's the song, and it's just like it's dope. It's still good. It's still a good entrance.
No, because like Edge, like it was the whole like Matt Hardy, Lita, real life love triangle thing that they started to bring. They brought into actual storyline, and that started getting him over. But I agree. It's like once he finally got that song, and he became the rated R superstar.
Yeah,
he became the Hall of Famer that we know today. And I did watch WrestleMania this year, and I thought that match with Randy Orton was one of my favorite WWE matches. It was spectacular. I know opinions were mixed generally, but I thought it was great. So did I. And come to find out, that match wasn't planned out. They had another match completely planned out, and it was supposed to actually go outside and all this stuff, but it was light when they were filming it, but the match was going to air when it was dark, so for continuity, they couldn't do it. So they basically put that entire 28 minutes together on the fly.
That's awesome. And it really benefited from the no crowd, because there's always that dissonance of like, they went backstage and then you hear the crowd, but it's like, they can't see anything. And, but in this, because the context was like, they can fight wherever, who cares? There's no live crowd. That made it work for me a little more.
Yeah. I thought it was great. Yeah. That, and then, the Undertaker, the Boneyard match, the Firefly Funhouse, those are all and what we were talking about, beginning of the podcast, kind of these new cinematic matches, as they're calling them now. I'm really into them. It's a completely different way of looking at wrestling. Well, in a way it is, because you had the company like Lucha Underground who was kind of doing something like that, before.
Exactly.
And there's a couple other companies that have tried to do things like that.
And you can look back to the final deletion stuff, right? With the parties, and which was a very weird time for that company, but that particular match, I feel really marks a break into doing this kind of stuff more generally. That's a great match. It's so fun.
The final deletion, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a big I've never been an Impact or TNA guy, but I definitely kept up with those, those matches. And I was really hoping they were going to do more with the Broken Matt character once he got to WWE. But at the same time, I didn't have the faith in Vince either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's always a big question mark. Like, all right, here's this hot thing. Are you not going to understand why people like it? No. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
It's like like I said, I mean, I cover NXT weekly, so it's like, I get all these guys, guys and girls that I get so invested in, and I, like Keith Lee, Rhea Ripley, Io Shirai, and I selfishly want them to stay on NXT. I don't want them to get called up because I don't want them to go the way of Bobby Roode or EC3 or, it's just, but that's again another rabbit hole I could spend days talking about.
I will say that Keith Lee was in one of my last favorite matches that I saw live before he went to NXT. He wrestled, excuse me, he wrestled Penta L0M at the time.
Oh, nice.
Was it? I can't remember who was running the show. It wasn't MLW. It doesn't matter. Anyway, it was this like pretty small show out here in Chicago, but they had this like 8-minute match kind of in the middle of the show, and it was perfect. It was like exactly what you want to see out of those two guys. And it was the first time I'd ever seen Keith Lee, like ever. Like I'd never seen him on, YouTube or anything.
Yep.
And it was just so impressive, like just such a monster. So I'm glad that he's having success, because if anyone deserves it, it's that dude.
Oh, by far. Conrad, Keith Lee is a guy, if you're not, and I don't think I've pointed him out to you before. He's a guy that he's a Conrad guy, like all the way. He's not necessarily out there and outlandish in his gimmick or anything, but just his style. He's actually Tom Stout. He calls him kind of like a new age John Cena. And it's a weird comparison, because if you look at John Cena compared to Keith Lee is about 350 pounds and black. But
combine Cena with Brock Lesnar.
Yeah,
Keith Lee.
Yeah, pretty much. But he has the same type of charisma, and ring presence about him as Cena, and he's gonna be a huge star, no doubt about it. He actually got some time against Brock Lesnar in the Royal Rumble this year, which is
I remember that happened. Yeah, I saw the gif of Brock just with the like, I don't know if you curse on the show. Who the F is this guy?
Yeah.
Yep.
Just
extremely good.
That was fantastic. So moving things along here, or we'd be here all night.
We'll probably have to wrap up in a little bit, because I need to figure out what's going on with our power situation.
No, not a problem. We're actually kind of wrapping up anyway here. So as you are an independent game designer, what advice do you have for any other game designers out there that might be trying to enter this space?
I think the most important thing is to just do a lot of the work, whatever the work is, whether that's, in this context, making games, designing games, writing games. But if you have, whatever your pursuit is, just kind of keep on doing it. I think a lot of people have a passion project, and then they'll get kind of burned out on it, either because they feel like it doesn't get traction, or people aren't into it, or they kind of hit some point of diminishing returns with putting energy into it. And I think the thing, if you want to, if you want to actualize your voice and your vision as a designer, you need to keep making games. And sometimes that means putting one aside, and sometimes that means you do a game, and then you do another game, then you do another game, as long as you have inspiration. And the success, quote unquote, that is semi-independent of the quality of your work. And I'm not saying that quantity is better than quality or anything like that, but it's like the my experience has been, and I think for most other people in my position, where you're a independent publisher, and for me, I'm in a very fortunate position where I've been able to make it my full-time job. I also freelance doing graphic design, so like those to get, but I mostly work for other game designers. So like, games is basically what I do. But I was writing games for 7 or 8 years before. Like I published Worldwide Wrestling before, or right as I transitioned into being full-time, and I've been making games for 7 years before that. My first, or 8, something like that. My first the first game I published was in 2005. So, and some of those are great games. Some of those are, there's nothing. It's not like those are worse because they were earlier or anything. But Worldwide Wrestling happened to hit a certain segment of interest in a way that I had not anticipated. And the success of that boosted my audience to where my other stuff also got more eyes, right? And that's what kind of made it more of a thing. And that's not the only way to do it, but like, I guess when there's no secret sauce is what I'm trying to say here. It's like, you just gotta kind of do the work, find your audience, put in the time, figure out your voice, like all that stuff. And if and if it continues bringing you rewards, whether they're emotional or financial or social or whatever they are, keep on doing it. And then you'll wake up one day and be like, I've been doing this for 10 years. And now people are starting to think that I'm, oh, you're a success. You're an overnight success. It's like, yeah, overnight success takes like, 10 years, 12 years.
Right. Yeah. It's not necessarily overnight, by any stretch. Stretch.
And I think that's true for, most creative pursuits, but that's my advice.
All right. Cool. And Conrad, why don't you bring us home?
We saw that in April, as you brought up a couple times, that this year you successfully kickstarted a second edition for the game. Congratulations. What can you tell us about what's new and why people should check it out?
So the second edition is both a bringing together of all the material that's been out for the game, because there's the core book, there was the expansion book, International Incident, that came out a couple years later, plus some PDF supplements, some other assorted, bits and bobs. So over the course of doing that, some of the stuff that, came out later kind of superseded stuff that was in the original book, just because, I had more experience with the game, saw a different way to do things, that kind of thing. So this edition is kind of like taking all that, bringing it together, and then smoothing out all those rough edges so that there's everything kind of is in its place and has its purpose. And then there's also revisiting the core of the game and not really changing things, but kind of tuning them up, applying things that I've learned over, the 5 years that the game's been out, and that I've learned from players, because I, again, am very fortunate that many people have played the game, and some of them have told me about it. And so you start to see patterns in the feedback, right? And so addressing some of those, like, as a term of art, I call them pain points. They're, little hitches, things that come up and people are like, that's a little weird, or I don't, whenever we play, we kind of ignore that, like that kind of stuff, and tuning those. So the mechanics are, the core mechanics are not different in concept. Like they all basically work the same, but there's a lot of the details have changed. How momentum accumulates has gotten a big retuning so that it's more evenly distributed amongst all the players and a little less boom and bust, for, depending on die rolls and whatnot. So that's like a lot of the under the hood stuff. And then I think when you pick up the game, it's going to just have there's just more stuff. There's bringing in a lot of the rules from the international incident supplement to build out kind of the menu of options for things to just like pick up different match stipulations and playing characters of different kind of wrestling traditions and all that kind of stuff. I've also really built out the promotion rules, really treating promotions as their own character, and how the storyline events feed into the promotion development, and having that all be kind of cohesive. They're optional. You don't have to play with the living promotion, but if you want to, you don't have to, like, you just play the game and you just add this stuff onto it. There's no like, it's kind of, or ideally it's kind of seamless. You don't have to do a bunch of like, this says this on this page, but if we're doing living promotion, we have to do it this way. It's like, no, it just all works. So, and that's pretty exciting. I've been very happy to bring that in. I've also brought in one of the mini supplements that was written by a big fan of the game and friend, and then I developed it for the PDF, but it's the on the road stuff. So it's for playing out scenes between episodes. So scenes for when your wrestlers are on the road, whether they're doing promotion or literally traveling or going home to see their family, like that kind of stuff. And those can drop in whenever you want. You could have a whole session of that stuff. You could have one little scene per character, or you can ignore it if that's not what you're interested in. But building that out again to be part of the like integrated, everything just works kind of flow. Yeah, so those are the main things. There's going to be a bunch of example promotions, many of them from the Kickstarter backers, which I'm very excited to get together. I've started getting the pitches for those. So yeah, that's a bunch of stuff.
That's awesome. Very exciting stuff. Very exciting stuff. And you guys can all find that at ndpdesign.com if I'm not mistaken, correct?
That's right. Yeah, that's my hub for everything. So all of my games, zines that I do as well, podcasts, and links to actual play stuff, links to interviews, and links to potentially hire me are all there. Right.
Hey, hire him. Hey, no, Nathan, we certainly appreciate you coming out tonight. Especially with your power issues at home.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate you.
You really got the full non kayfabe experience.
As I was saying to these guys when you dropped off for a little bit, you on Raw and SmackDown, there's this new terrorist organization that is wreaking havoc across the technology of the television show, and they've apparently struck the Degecast.
They got to you too.
They got to me too. But no, like I said, just certainly appreciate it. We had a blast playing this game. I had a blast actually GMing it. It was the first time that
awesome.
that I GM'd a game for anybody. For an actual group. I GM'd a game once before, a game of Clink for my wife, but it didn't last long. It was like an hour. So I don't call it my first GM experience. This was my first GM experience, and I certainly enjoyed it. I hope everybody that watched it enjoyed it as well, because this does wrap up our look at the Worldwide Wrestling RPG. Next week, we're actually on Friday. Join us. We're going to be taking a look at Feral Games' Ghost Ops, which is a military-style RPG. Conrad's going to have us on all aboard a train for a few weeks here. This should be a good time. But for the Degecast, I am Nate Lindberg. Again, you can find me on Twitter at Nate Lindberg. Tony, say good night, my friend.
Good night.
Ed, Conrad, good night.
Good night.
All right. And we will see you guys next week. Take care.